To expand the conversation, we're joined by our SABC News correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, a very good evening to you. Welcome. And of course, as we've been consistently hearing that the focal point of this meeting will revolve around trade and bilateral relations, given the dire state of relations between the U.S. and South Africa and all the falsehoods President Donald Trump is spreading about this country, what awaits President Cyril Ramaphosa in the White House?
Yeah, so the South African delegation would certainly have us believe that the focus of this discussion is going to be purely on trade, tariffs, and the future economic relationship. But there is so much in this conversation that the waters essentially in Paul has been muddied by the narrative that has emanated from the highest levels of the White House. There is an executive order that has been signed by President Donald Trump impugning the governance of South Africa, the human rights record of South Africa, in particular as it relates to white Afrikaners who are already arriving in the country as refugees. The South African delegation believes they've addressed this. They believe it is an untruth and therefore needs to be, buried. The question then becomes, if you have an open format in the Oval Office, which we've now become accustomed to in terms of how Donald Trump hosts heads of government and heads of state in that reality TV setting, journalists are then allowed to ask questions about anything they choose, right? Trump points at a journalist and they can lob a question either at him or the other principal. On Wednesday, it'll be President Ramaphosa. And so what they also need to be alive to is the fact that the conversation can go in any direction if you are in that reality TV live television setting. And so they need to be prepared for anything. And I think there is a quiet confidence that's emanating from this delegation. There was a quiet confidence that emanated from Vincent Magwenya's posture when we spoke to him earlier, the presidential spokesperson. And we know that there is going to be a rigorous briefing of the president by the likes of Ronald Lamola, the Minister of International Relations, the local embassy staff that have been on the ground engaging with their U.S. interlocutors. And so they will be prepared for anything. But, once we get confirmation as to the format of Wednesday's meeting, will it be in front of the media? Will they take questions? If that is the case, then, anything can really happen in that conversation.
Yeah, more so if one has to recall that disastrous Zelensky-style ambush as a basis for which direction this discussion could take. It seems a big gamble for President Ramaphosa, but of course, one he clearly feels he has to take to try and rescue these relations.
Absolutely right. And certainly they don't want it to go like Zelensky, right? Maybe the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Carney's meeting is more sort of emblematic of how they will stand their ground, right? I've been saying in our coverage today, what is the link between we will not be bullied, but also then seeing the bigger picture in terms of the future relationship with the United States? Is it about, ensuring that AGOA is renewed in September? Is it to ensure that South Africa maintains and retains its preferential status? But if you sort of read the tea leaves, the sense is that might not happen. And so the question then becomes, does South Africa have something in its back pocket to put on the table in terms of a new deal with the United States? What are they going to offer? Are they, we often hear things in the vein of, rare minerals, these rare earth minerals, which is the future of a renewable economy, right? The batteries and the lithiums and all these manganese, for example, that is required in a renewable future. Does South Africa have something new they can put on the table in terms of making a new bilateral trade economic deal moving forward? Park Tau's role in that will be catalytic in terms of framing the conversation. I think he's been working very hard behind the scenes and will come in support of the president here alongside Kumbutu Ntshabeni, the minister in the presidency, who has been very critical in terms of peace negotiations and mediation with Ukraine. You have John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Agriculture, seeking to expand a $1 billion, 20 billion rand export relationship in terms of agriculture with the United States. You have the new U.S. envoy, SABC Jonas, that is en route here, and so it'll be an all hands on deck. Ronald Lamola, the Minister of International Relations, coming straight from bilaterals in France and then The Hague in the Netherlands, right onto this pressure cooker of a moment here in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. So it's an all hands on deck approach. The South Africans want to focus on the future relationship, but how that meeting goes on Wednesday will very much be determinative of where the relationship goes moving forward, particularly also important, not just in a bilateral sense, but also in a multilateral sense. South Africa as G20 president wants heads of state and delegations that are party to the G20 to engage at the highest levels. South Africa has extended an invitation to President Trump for a state visit alongside the G20. So how this this bromanship, if you will, between the two heads of state goes on Wednesday, I think will be able to provide us with a pathway and a runway to how this relationship pans out in the weeks, months and years ahead.
In fact, I heard you as you were posing questions to the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, emphasizing a little bit about the G20, but also speaking about the focus being an economic focus, a deal that needs to be put on the table to see what happens when the South African delegation leaves the U.S.
Yeah, and remember, you're dealing with someone that has he's the poster child of deal making, right? The book that Donald Trump co-authored, I think he might have had a ghostwriter, is called The Art of the Deal. So he's looking for something transactional. Remember, his priority here is America first, and the focus has very much been on rejigging the U.S. economy, be that vis-a-vis the reciprocal tariffs that were initially imposed on countries. South Africa was initially at 30%, and then of course it was the retraction of that. You've seen a sort of détente in the relationship between the world's two largest economies. In sort of the backtrack you've seen in terms of the imposition of 145% tariffs on Chinese imports into the United States, and then their sort of tit-for-tat reaction with 125%. There's been a lot of backtrack in that, and so the question is going to be, how can the South African delegation frame the beneficial future economic relationship between Washington and Pretoria, right? Kumbutso Mchabeni was talking about how earlier this week about how there are over 600 American companies invested in South Africa. We also hear sort of speculation about whether or not there might be a conversation between Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, and the owner of Starlink. That has been a burden on South Africa's shoulders in terms of managing that relationship. What does winning over an Elon Musk mean for the future relationship with the United States? It could be pivotal, it could not be, right? His power seems to be fading here in Washington as the share price of Tesla has slumped, and so the business interests are now more consuming than perhaps the political persuasions of Elon Musk as it relates to the Trump administration. So there's just a vast amount of possibility here. The question is, will South Africa be able to assert itself? Will South Africa be able to leave here with what it's come to achieve? Those are open-ended questions, and all eyes will be on that bilateral on Wednesday afternoon around 8 p.m. South African time. We're told, of course, situation is very fluid and poor, but we're told that it could be in the afternoon my time here in Washington, D.C., 6-hour difference around 8 p.m. South African time, but that's all to be confirmed. We'll get a full briefing from the presidency only tomorrow morning once the president himself has been briefed by the underlings that are part of his delegation.
Very well, thank you very much. That update by SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, giving us a sense of what is happening on the ground in the U.S. ahead of that big meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa and his counterpart, President Donald Trump.